I understand why, but it doesn't make it hurt any less. What's cracking, everybody, and welcome back to Kraken R&R, where, well, the game sucked. The Kraken lose 5-3 to the Nashville Predators, one of the few teams below them in the standings, which in that way it actually helps them long term. It's a pretty big loss for the Kraken in trying to move up in the draft order, at least the draft lottery order anyway, but it was still a very ugly game. And at the same time, I don't think anybody here is really more interested in the game, although that is what we're going to focus on. I'll still have a whole nother video on the trade deadline and the big trade that already happened that took Gord and Bjorkstrand from us. Two of the three players that had rumors circling around them that I was kind of hoping wouldn't leave, but especially with Gord being on an expiring contract, I mean, it kind of made sense that he would go. Though I will say, that return, oh man, did the Kraken come out like bandits in the trade, even for as much as it hurts emotionally. Just for anybody that has been living under a rock or only pays attention to the games, which I suppose is fair enough. The Kraken yesterday traded Yanni Gord and Oliver Bjorkstrand to the Tampa Bay Lightning, in exchange getting Mikey Azimont, which if you were watching the game, you would have seen him playing. He even scored a goal for the Kraken, so that was kind of fun. It was a garbage time goal, but still. And they also get 2 first-round picks and a second-round pick back from the Lightning. Both of the first-round picks, the Lightning's 2026 and 27 first-round picks, and the second-round pick is a 2025 pick that belongs to Toronto. Which, again, I'll go into the trade in a lot more detail in the dedicated trade deadline video that will be one of many over the course of this weekend. It's going to be a busy weekend on the channel since the Kraken, of course, have a back-to-back after the deadline on Friday. But just as a quick reaction, that is a heck of a return for the Kraken. I probably would have been alright with a first and a player back, maybe a first, a third, and a player, but 2 firsts, a second, and an NHL player. I mean, he's a bottom 6, 4th line guy for the Kraken. He's 4th line in this game, and that's probably not going to change the rest of the season, but still, 2 first-round picks and a second-round pick back for Gord and Bjorkstrand. I mean, it kind of feels like the Tampa Bay Lightning were paying for not only the players they were getting on the ice, but also the emotional toll that it would take on the Kraken fans to see them leave. So, I mean, it sucks, but that is a great return for the Kraken. And just real quick, for anybody that's looking at the first-round picks being in 2026 and 27 and thinking, great, by the time those picks are in the NHL, we're looking at 5, 6, 7 years down the road, this team is kind of screwed for the long term. I don't think either one of those first-round picks are going to be taken by the Kraken. Their final destination is somewhere else. That is all, even maybe the second-round pick, ammunition for the Kraken this offseason to go out and make other trades to bring in some bigger names, take some big swings this offseason. I don't think the team is just going to sit on those picks and really build towards a window that's 5, 6 years off, especially with the progress that guys like Beniers and Wright are making, not to mention Evans and Kakko, and Dunn would be past his prime by the point that you'd have those first-round picks really making difference in the NHL. So, yeah, don't expect the Kraken to be keeping those picks for very long. It'll just make this offseason all the more interesting. But at the same time, even with all that being said, and even with the great return in the here and now, yeah, it still definitely hurts, especially with it being those 2 guys out the door, and then it doesn't help that when the Kraken are down 4-1 against one of the few teams worse than them this season, you get to see Bjorkstrand score the game winner for Tampa Bay off a primary assist from Gord. Now, I suppose at least the player the Kraken got back also scored the last goal in this game. It just didn't matter nearly as much as Bjorkstrand's goal for the Lightning. And I suppose that brings us to why it didn't matter nearly as much. I mean, for one, there's the obvious. The Lightning are in a playoff race, not to make the playoffs. They're going to make the playoffs, no problem. But they are in a race for seeding and a chance to win that division, which right now is a very tight race between them, the Leafs, and Panthers. Meanwhile, as we know with the Kraken, the only race they're in is to see if they can get down to the 3rd best odds at the 1st overall pick. Which sadly, or fortunately I suppose, depending on how you want to look at it, after this loss to the Predators is quite possible for the Kraken. They currently sit in the 5th best odds, or 5th worst in the league, and there are 2 teams in these Predators and the Buffalo Sabres that they could still end up dropping below to get into that 3rd spot. And there's absolutely no chance, I mean, I suppose mathematically they're kind of but effectively there's no chance that the Kraken are going to catch either one of the Sharks or Blackhawks, who have absolutely run away with the tank this season. I'm actually not even sure if the Blackhawks can win the lottery, because they've already won it twice and there's some new rules around that. I'll have to look into that as the time comes. Either way, the best the Kraken can do, or worst, is the 3rd best odds, and well, this loss to the Predators definitely helps that. It still would have been nice if the Kraken could have made it a little bit less ugly. Now things get off to a pretty good start for the Kraken, who do have a pretty different lineup. I suppose we should take a second on the lineup that looks a lot more different than it has for quite a while. I mean, the first 2 lines are still the same. You've got Beniers with Kakko and Schwartz, Wright with McCann and Burakovsky, and even the 3rd line is not that different. Obviously, with Bjorkstrand gone, you have Eberle jumping up into that spot, but it's still Stevenson and Tolvanen. The 4th line, however, is all new faces, or mostly new. Anyway, Ben Myers is back with the Kraken, centering that line for this game. Meanwhile, on his wings, you have 2 new faces in the newly traded for Mikey Aziamont, as well as making his NHL debut 5th round pick from the same draft that Beniers was in, Jacob Melanson. So welcome to the NHL, another debut for the Kraken, this time not in net. Decord in net again for the Kraken for the millionth time this season. It's starting to get to a point where you have to wonder if the Kraken should maybe start Grubauer a little bit here, really go to a platoon the rest of the way. It's not like you're playing for anything, and in fact, if you really are not a Grubauer believer, starting Grubauer a little bit more might help the Kraken along the way to those better draft odds. Not to mention the fact that running Decord into the ground could hurt his confidence going forward, and that's definitely not something you want for trying to compete next season. Or maybe even worse, get him injured. And you can't tell me not to worry about those things, even though it didn't happen with the Kraken on the injury front. We all remember what happened to Chris Drieger. And then as far as the confidence thing is concerned, I mean, Decord is a pretty self-confident guy, I think. At the same time, though, if the Kraken keep playing defensively like they did in front of him in this game, and really have over the last few games, they're going to start making 850 save percentages feel like 950, but Decord is still going to let pucks past him and wonder if he's doing something wrong. But anyway, maybe that's a discussion for another time. As far as the game is concerned, again, the Kraken get off to a pretty good start. A minute into the game, actually less than a minute into the game, they're already in the lead. The first line gets into the offensive end, cycles the puck a couple of times, and then a shot from Vince Dunn rebounds off of either Saros or a defenseman in front, out to, of all people lurking in front of the net, it's Adam Larsson, who backhand shovels the puck over the shoulder and into the top corner of the net to give the Kraken the early 1-0 lead, as Larsson scores for the 2nd game in a row. Unfortunately, it would be all downhill from there, and if you want to know how downhill, well, by the midpoint of the game, and I'd even argue by the 40-minute mark of the game, so the 2nd intermission, the biggest offensive threat the Kraken had throughout that time was Adam Larsson. So yeah, that's how things were going for the Kraken, at least offensively. Meanwhile, defensively, you could have thought that the Kraken end of the ice was a bakery in Paris on a nice summer morning, the way that they were serving up turnovers. I mean, I don't actually know if a turnover is a popular French pastry, but you get my point. The Kraken were turning over the puck in their own end of the ice over and over and over and over and over again, forcing Decord to make great save after great save, and, well, eventually it was just going to be one too many. Now, this one, the one that ends up tying the game, does start with Decord. He goes out to play the puck, but it really isn't his fault at all. He plays it well up along the boards to Dunn, who gets it on his stick, and then loses an edge, falls down, and it turns into a 2-on-1 back the other way. The puck gets to a wide open player in front of the net. One move later, he fires off the shot and puts it past the glove of Decord into the net after he had just gotten back in front of it to tie the game. Now, fortunately for the Kraken, somehow, by some miracle, a miracle named Joey Decord for the most part anyway, this is the only of these constant defensive blunders in the first period that does end up in the back of the Kraken net, including a power play that the Predators get almost immediately after they tie the game, and very nearly score. If it wasn't for a great save from Decord, would have scored almost right away on that power play, but the Kraken kill all that off, and then do a pretty good job of evening things out through the back half of the first, so we get to the first intermission with things still tied at 1. At which point, we of course head to the second period, because that's how the game works, and we know how the second period goes for the Kraken. Sure, they did have the one good second period a couple games ago, but there's a reason that that was notable, and it's games like this one. As early in the second period, after the Kraken got an early chance to take the lead on the tail end of a power play that they had that spanned the intermission, at 5-on-5, it goes right back to Predators pressure the entire time, and the Kraken, who had been trying to get the puck into their own net by turning the puck over in their own end of the ice throughout the entire first period, clearly that wasn't working well enough for them, so they take matters into their own hands and start putting it in the back of the net themselves. Okay, I suppose the first one of the second period for the Predators isn't actually the Kraken putting it in their own net. This is just the Kraken turning it over again in their own end of the ice, allowing the Predators to get a little bit more zone time, and eventually a shot from right down Main Street. There's a massive screen in front of Decord. He has absolutely no chance to see the shot coming, and it's placed well enough into the top corner that it gets past him to give the Predators the 2-1 lead. And then a few minutes later, after some more Predators pressure, the Kraken do actually start putting the puck in the net themselves. Their own net, that is. And this one is, I mean, they're both accidental. It's not like the Kraken are trying to put it in their net, and it really wasn't even necessarily that bad of a play, really either one of them. But the first one, it's a still kind of sketchily played back check by the Kraken, but at least Shane Wright is in place to break up the pass across on the rush chance into the Kraken end. Unfortunately, though, when he does break up the Forsberg pass, reaching out to get the blade of his stick on it, it goes off the blade of his stick right through the 5-hole of Decord and into the back of the net, as Decord is expecting that pass to get through, but it goes off right stick and into the net behind him. It's unfortunately also the closest Wright would get to continuing his run of goal scoring, or at least point scoring anyway. I mean, that's not actually true. He had 2 very good chances on a power play in the third period that, I mean, one of them would have ended up in the back of the net if it didn't go off Kaapo Kakko's skate on the way there. The point is, though, it's an unfortunate bounce for the Kraken, it's an own goal, and it's a 3-1 Nashville lead. Now, I suppose it is only at this point a 2-goal lead for the Predators, and that's definitely within the realm of possibility for the Kraken to come back with another fantastic third period and at least tie the game, send it to overtime. Heck, we've seen them win in regulation from bigger deficits this season. I mean, these are the Predators, not the Canucks, and while their record might suggest they're a little bit worse, at least in this game, they played quite a bit better than their record would suggest. Still, the Kraken are able to at least stop the bleeding throughout the rest of the second period, or almost the rest of the second period, and again, thanks in large part to Decord's play in net. But at the end, with less than 10 seconds left, as those final seconds are ticking off, the Predators get one more chance, a wraparound behind the net out to the far side. Decord gets his toe back to that post in plenty of time to make the save, but unfortunately it's Mahura trying to do the right thing and put his stick in front of it and prevent that shot from happening in the first place, but instead the blade of his stick kind of just serves as a jump for the puck to ramp off and over the pad of Decord and into the back of the net, as he was only able to get his foot to the far post and not his shoulder quite yet, so there's still the gap above that pad. It goes in there, and it is 4-1 Predators with just 7 seconds left on the clock, and that is the score that the third period would start with. A third period that, once again, in spite of a bit of a shaky start for the first couple of minutes, is the best period of the game for the Kraken. They played fantastic, and maybe some of that is the Predators not pressing quite as hard as they did through the first 40 minutes, since they do have a 3-goal lead. But the Kraken earned a couple power plays, almost score on the first one. Again, Shane Wright had a couple of very good chances. One of them, I think, would have gone if it wasn't for Kaapo Kakko not quite able to get his foot out of the way as he tried to jump over the shot. And then Beniers had another good look on a tipped pass from, I think it was Schwartz or maybe Dunn. Maybe it was Montour, actually. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. Saros comes up with the save on that one, so the Kraken don't score on that power play. Then they get another chance. The second one actually drawn by Melanson, who overall I thought had a pretty good NHL debut. That fourth line, in general, I thought played pretty well in this game. In fact, for a large chunk of the game, they seemed like the most cohesive, consistent line for the Kraken. Their first shift in the first period, they definitely got hemmed in with seemingly no hope in the world of getting the puck back or out across the blue line. But from there on, the rest of the game, they were, I mean, definitely grinding it out. Good on the forecheck, pretty good on the back check. A definitely respectable fourth line, especially considering 2 of them were playing their first game for the Kraken, and one of them was playing his first game in the NHL. Still, it's definitely not ideal when maybe your best line of the game is a fourth line consisting of that group of guys. Either way, the Kraken go to the second power play, very much needing a goal if they want to get back into this game. And although it takes until the last few seconds of the power play, they eventually get that goal. And it's a goal that, oh man, have we been waiting for something like this for months and wishing that we were seeing a lot more of it, as it's a return to the only other way the Kraken have really ever consistently scored on a power play, certainly before Wright came and took that role over. But it's Jared McCann up by the blue line, skating into a shot, winding up and absolutely firing off a bomb, blasting a bullet into the top corner far side of the net. It's in and out of the net faster than the camera can catch up with it, and the Kraken pull to within 2 as McCann finally finds the net on one of these shots. Unfortunately though, or fortunately I suppose if you're all in on rooting for the tank, as we already know, it would be too little too late. The Kraken would pull Decord pretty aggressively early. Around 4 minutes is when they end up getting Decord out of the net with a face-off in the Nashville end of the ice. But the Predators do find the empty net before too long, and that effectively kills any hope the Kraken had of actually coming back to win this game. I mean, there was maybe a sliver of hope for people that were really hoping on another miracle comeback when the Kraken, ever the team to at least win the third period, do end up scoring a couple minutes later with less than 2 minutes left in the game. And it's Mikey Eyssimont streaking down the offensive end. A pass from Uhura up in the high face-off circle along the boards. He throws out in front of the net to Eyssimont, who has gotten himself on the other side of the last defenseman. His stick on the ice, he tips it in over Saros and into the net to give the Kraken their third goal of the game, and him his first goal as a Kraken, 6th of the season. And with that making it 5-3, that is where the scoring would end. The Kraken do end up pulling Decord for the last minute and a half. They don't give up another empty net goal, and we get to that 5-3 final score. Again, a game where the Kraken played really ugly defensively, especially through the first 40 minutes, and not that great offensively either, except for the couple of bursts, one right at the start of the game that got them that first goal, and a couple odd shifts here and there throughout those first 40 minutes, but for the most part, it was controlled by the Predators and helped out by the Kraken turning the puck over pretty much constantly. I mean, it's like a old-fashioned Oprah show out there, how quickly they're turning over the puck and just handing it to Predators players with open ice and grade A chances in the Kraken end. So if they're going to keep playing defense like that, they need to start giving Decord a little bit more rest. Or, yeah, I mean, it's not like Grubauer is not used to seeing terrible defense in front of him, so throw him out there. And I mean, his fate seems like it's kind of sealed already at the end of the season, so try and save Decord a little bit would be my feeling on that, but we'll see what happens. It seems like they're perfectly willing to just keep trying Decord out there unless it's a back-to-back or something like that. I mean, the next 2 games are back-to-back, so Decord will get one of those starts and Grubauer the other. And then hopefully the rest of the way, Decord can get a little bit of a rest and not be run into the ground. Aside from that, again, liked what we saw from the 2 new guys. Eyssimont played pretty well. He had the goal at the end and also had another pretty similar chance earlier on in the game that just went over the crossbar or maybe got a piece of the bar and out. So, I mean, he's not a goal scorer. His offensive game is definitely not his strong suit. He's a defensively focused more forward, and that's, I mean, his role on the fourth line is going to be largely that. Plus, he's a UFA at the end of the season. It's not like he's going to be part of the team next year. Much more likely than not. Meanwhile, the NHL debut of Melanson, he could be a part of the team going forward, and he, I mean, looked pretty good for a fourth line grinder that he is going to be if he's going to get any kind of meaningful NHL time. He was second on the team to only Ellie Tolvanen in hits with 4 in the game. So, yeah, nice grinding game from Melanson. And, I mean, he had a couple of chances to get on the score sheet. It was kind of mucking it up around the front of the net, which is not something we've seen a lot of from Kraken players this season. In fact, it's been a large complaint of their offensive woes is that they're not getting to the net front nearly enough. He was there a couple of times, that fourth line just kind of getting into that top of the crease and trying to force some things to happen off of rebounds. They weren't really able to make it happen in that way, but there were some chances there, and yeah, just generally a respectable debut. Not necessarily anything that's going to, wasn't like crazy amazing or anything like that, but it was definitely a respectable start to his NHL career. And just generally beside that, it's good to see another one of that first ever draft class for the Kraken making their NHL debut. He's now the 4th member of that first ever draft class to play a game in the NHL. Beniers obviously has made it, Evans, and we've also seen some games from Winterton, who will probably get more of a look, and I think we'll probably see some Winterton later this season as we get into the last few games, and he'll get a good chance to earn a spot on the roster, I think, in camp next year. We'll have to see, but yeah, generally a good game there. They were definitely not the problem, that fourth line. The problem was pretty much everywhere else, except for Adam Larsson, who had one of his best offensive games as a Seattle Kraken. The problem was that he was just about the only Kraken player that had a notably good offensive game in this one. And finally, before we get to the Kraken 3 stars, the last thing that I want to mention here, because it's the nice even point where Kakko has now played as many games with the Kraken as he did with the Rangers before that trade. He had 30 games with the Rangers where he had the 4 goals and 10 assists for 14 points. Now, in 30 games, with an assist on that Larsson goal to start out things for the Kraken in this game, in 30 games, he has 6 goals and 16 assists for 22 points, so it has slowed down a little bit and certainly leaned a lot more on the assists rather than the goal scoring, and there were a couple points in this game, and we've seen it a little bit here recently where he seems to look pass first, and that's definitely something that was true in New York as well. Yeah, he had a couple points in this game as well where he opted to go for passes just to keep the Kraken in the offensive end rather than going for the shot. And he has a good enough shot that, especially even from a medium danger chance, you'd like to see him shoot that. I mean, one in particular that they talked about on the broadcast was one where he had a shot from kind of the low face-off circle, maybe more mid face-off circle, an open shot that Saros might have been able to save. It's not like there was any traffic in front of him, and Saros is a very good goaltender, but if you shoot it low, you had Schwartz coming down the middle in the slot, maybe you get a rebound out to Schwartz, and that's the type of chance that could end up in. Instead, he passed it out to Dunn. The Kraken kept in the offensive end, which is, it's good, but, I mean, you're keeping it in the offensive end so that you can get good chances like that. So giving up a good chance just to hope that you get another good chance later on in the same sequence kind of doesn't make a lot of sense. Anyway, all that to say, he's been playing very well, as we know, and certainly with a expanded role here with the Kraken, it has made a big difference. As far as the Kraken 3 stars in this game are concerned, as always brought to you by the patrons over on Patreon. I mean, Patreon thought similarly to me in this one that I don't know that we're going to get 3 stars. I'll give out at least 2. I'll give one to Adam Larsson for just generally having a pretty good game. Weirdly enough for Larsson, a much better offensive game than the defensive game. His defensive game by his own standard was average to maybe slightly below average, but still better than most of the players on the team. And like I said, for the majority of the game, and really for the game on a whole, he was the most dangerous offensive threat the Kraken had throughout it. So yeah, we'll go Adam Larsson for the first star, and second star with no third, I think, in this one. I'll go with Mikey Azimont. He did have a good Kraken debut. First game since the trade, scores the goal, even if it was a meaningless one at the end. He had a couple of other good chances, and even with some good things to say about the other 2 guys on that fourth line in this game, Azimont certainly was the best of the 3. So yeah, we'll go with the 2 stars of Larsson and Azimont. I mean, let me know what you think in the comment section below if you'd like to add a 3rd star, or if you'd change around which stars there were, maybe have fewer, maybe have 0, considering the Kraken lost 5-3 to the Nashville Predators. Let me know down in the comments how you're feeling right now with the trades going on. Also of note, Tanev was a scratch in this game for, well, as they call it, bubble wrap reasons. Just trying to keep him safe and not hurt right before the deadline, which means he is very likely to get traded. We saw that happen for a few games back with Mark Giordano in the inaugural season. Tanev very likely out the door tomorrow. By the time you're watching this, that trade may have already happened. And we'll see if there's any other names. I mean, we already talked about it in the What to Expect video that I barely got out in time, and well, didn't even get out in time for the first big trade. So yeah, let me know what you think down in the comments, and we'll be back for the recap of what the Kraken do here on Friday, and then back-to-back games on the weekend. So we've seen a lot of each other here over the next few days. Until then, stay safe out there, be good to each other, God bless, and go Kraken.